All right, we're gonna give it a couple more minutes, let people kind of join in. So, yeah, so we'll just give them a couple more minutes. Okay, so we'll kind of dive in a moment or two, but if you can kind of chime in and say hi in the comments, that would be awesome. And then we'll get started in, like I said, a minute or two. Let more people join the fun. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So, welcome to, I think this is the fifth or sixth, maybe, yeah. I've kind of lost track of how many sessions of this that I've done. So, if you haven't seen all of them, they're all available here on the Facebook page. So, feel free at some point to kind of check those out and kind of see what's been happening up until then. So welcome. Many of you know I'm Eric Scott, and I've been doing this live stream journaling now since last week, and gonna do it again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and then gonna do it so far scheduled Monday and Tuesday of next week. Kind of dive into more things. Today, I wanted to focus on some simple drawing ideas. I think a lot of times whenever we sit down to make art in general, but also a lot of times when we are working in the journal, we get really caught up in like, oh, it has to be like this really deep, meaningful, powerful kind of thing. But I think sometimes we just need to get our hand moving. And so I want to share with you some very simple ideas that I have for drawing and doodling in the journal. So if you need some supplies, let me go ahead and switch over the view so that you can kind of see what I am working with. So you're going to need your journal or paper or something to work on, and then you're going to need some simple drawing materials, drawing supplies. And you can use anything that you want, and I'll share what I have here and talk about what I like and the reason that I choose these materials. So first of all, I have a pencil. This is just a drawing pencil, but you can use just a regular number 2 pencil, and I have an eraser in case I need it, but I try not to erase unless it's like from a mistake or something that I've made. I also have my favorite Uniball pens. These are the Uniball Vision pens, and I've got a couple of those. Got a blue one over here and a black one. Unfortunately, I don't have a red one, but I do have a Uniball pen. It's called Uniball Eco, and when I was at the store one time, they were out of the Vision pen, so I got this, and it works just as well. But I like the Vision pens, and I always get the waterproof and the fade proof. Another pen I really like is the Faber-Castell Pitt artist pens, and I find that they work really well, and the nice thing is that they travel well, so they don't kind of explode on an airplane and get ink everywhere. So I like using those. I've got a couple different colors of those. So those are some of my favorite drawing materials, and I'm going to use them just in very simple ways to either get things started or to add some things to the pages. So I wanted to kind of flip through the beginnings of this journal where the pages are a little bit more completed, a little bit more resolved, and sort of point out, especially like this line. I don't know if you noticed, it actually continues from here, so it connects. Whenever I turn it, it connects, comes around, connects there. So that way it kind of wanders through. So if I start over here, comes down, goes around, comes back, comes this way, does a loop, and it actually goes through the window there, and then comes up, and then connects over here, and then wanders through. And that's that little section that showed through the window. And then it comes up there, and it just kind of keeps wandering through. And that's something that I've been doing differently with this journal, really trying to think about how things connect, and kind of having this this running visual narrative and running kind of written narrative as well. So I talked about that whenever I was doing collage the other day, but again, you can see how that line runs through, but then you can also start to see some other drawn spaces in there. So that's something that I want to kind of focus on today. And here's a black line that kind of comes in as well, and then they both kind of go through and you know, again, really just kind of connect to one another. And I like how that line kind of echoes this line over here. So that's something that I want to kind of focus on, is just some simple drawing ideas as a way to start building up structure, to build to do some kind of random things. And you know, so again, you see some of these shapes that I've drawn with the pen. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to focus on. So I think I might even just start here. So if you haven't tuned in before, I jump around a lot, and that's one of the ways I really like to work. So I'm just going to grab my Uniball Vision pen, and I am going to add some things. So I've got some rectangles over here. I could maybe add some more rectangles, but I have a lot of straight lines here, so I'm thinking just some simple shapes. So I know it's nothing like revolutionary, like, oh, he's just drawing some circles. But what I find is that I don't have to think too much about this. I mean, I think a lot of times artists are like, oh, what am I going to draw? And I just find that if I can do some simple shapes, it adds to the page. Maybe down here, I want to do a bigger circle that maybe wanders over onto this page a little bit. And so these are some simple drawing ideas that get my hand moving, and I find that's very important. So shapes are really easy to do, and I just constantly flip through my book, and I'm kind of feeling like right here needs to be something. And so I think I'm just going to do some little rectangles. And these are quick, and they're easy, and they don't involve a lot of thinking, but they get my hand moving. And the other thing they do is they get my mind going. And so as I draw, I can focus not on the drawing, but just kind of clearing my mind. You might be familiar with Zentangle and that notion that drawing can be kind of meditative. And so that's what I feel about like with these simple shapes, that these simple shapes can be very meditative, and they allow me to really focus on the drawing without trying to like focus on drawing very realistically and things like that. So just simple shapes. So here I already have some circles. Now what I can do, and I do this often, is to go back and thicken, make things a little bit broader, a little bit bolder. And again, these just kind of help me focus. It's just, to me, it's doodling. I always call it doodling. And so this is great because I can sit and do it wherever. So I take my journal with me a lot, even my big 11 by 14 journal, and I'll take it lots of different places, and I can just sit and keep my hand busy. And it doesn't require it doesn't require me to go and sit in the studio and pull out the paints and pull out all these special materials. All I need to do is to pull out a pen or pull out a pencil. And that just becomes a way for me to quickly add to pages, build up layers. And again, I mentioned this idea that a lot of times it builds up structure. And so, now the dark circles over here start to balance out some of the dark spaces over here. And then I can just move on. Maybe I'll switch to my pencil this time. And so I'm just flipping through, trying to find some spaces. So I think this is a good space. It has a little bit of painting, has a little bit of collage, and now maybe I want to add some more. So I can keep doing the random shapes, but I'm going to get a little bit more random. So I do a lot of rectangles and circles in lines. I like that patterning. But this time I want to do a texture. And so I think I'm just going to do a bunch of really quick, random rectangles. And I think the key is I'm just going to let them overlap. And then some are going to be horizontal, and some are going to be big, and some are going to be small. And this is a H pencil. So the hardness is the level H. So it's a pretty hard pencil. It's not going to draw real dark. And that is going to be really good, and it's going to create a nice background texture as I'm working with it. And again, this is just keeping my hand moving. It's helping me quiet my mind. It's helping me to sit and think and reflect. Of course, as I'm talking to you, it's hard to reflect, but when I'm doing this in my day-to-day journaling, this just gives me an opportunity to get my hand moving and just focus and quiet my mind. And it's amazing what comes up as I do these things. And so these are very simple, stress-free. I'm not worrying about making a perfect rectangle. I'm not worrying about making a realistic drawing. Oftentimes I find that people will say, well, I can't draw. And they get really, really stressed out. There's a lot of anxiety. So as soon as I say, oh yeah, we're going to focus on drawing, a lot of people want to shut down because they just feel like, oh, well, drawing has to be this hyper realistic, ultra, photographic kind of quality. And I just feel like, okay, I'm just going to use the drawing to get my hand moving. And I love that Chuck Close quote. I've shared it many times before, but his quote goes, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work." And this is an easy way to show up at the journal and not have to worry about like, oh, what am I going to make? And I can just get moving. And so I don't know how easy you can see it in the video, but there's all these little lines here now, and it just creates this nice overall texture. So that's a great thing to do. And then I can build on top of it, and then eventually, like, the pencil marks might even kind of disappear in there. But all right, so I've worked on this 2-page spread quite a bit over the last few days, but to me it's screaming like I need some rectangles. So maybe I'll switch and I'll go to my favorite pastel. This I forget what the middle purple pink is what it's called, and I think it'll be a good color. And I think rectangles are squares. And one thing is that right now I'm doing them freehand, and I'm trying not to get caught up in like, oh, that's crooked, or oh, that's not straight. I can be very much a perfectionist, and so with this book, I'm really trying to force myself to accept what my hand makes and to be a little bit more spontaneous with things. And I think over here I'm going to do a nice big rectangle. And so if I can be a little bit more accepting of that spontaneity, and then it's just going to be better for me. So, but if you feel like, oh, I have this rectangular stencil I want to use. I mean, I have some of those, and I'll use them. But in this book, I'm really trying to force myself to accept that my hand is not perfect, and that do things quickly and spontaneously. And again, that allows me to kind of just focus my mind, quiet it down, and not worry about like judgment and things like that. So rectangles, circles, I use lots of very geometric shapes, and that creates a lot of structure. I am trying to be a little bit more spontaneous, like I said in this book. So I want to turn to shapes now. So let me go back to the red line, and I was working with that. And so the red line goes, and then it comes back, goes this way. So it kind of flows through, but then I kind of stopped it and then picked it back up here. And it started out with a spiral, and it spirals around, comes around, and then goes across and winds its way through. And it keeps winding its way through. So I've kind of stopped on this page. So I want to make connections. I want the lines to kind of wrap around. And like I said, this is something new that I'm really trying to do with this book. So if I take this and I see where it's kind of going to wrap around and then turn it. Now I have two things though. I have this one and then I have that. So I might put a little mark. So I'm trying to hold up my pen and look where that red mark comes in, and didn't quite make it big enough. All right, so I see a little red mark here where that comes into play. So now what I'm going to do is have this wind up, and I want it to line up right there. Okay. And so that way that starts to connect. However, over here, that's not connecting. So there's a couple ways I can deal with that. So maybe what I want to do is to bring that over and then have it sort of wander down here. And I'll deal with that later. Maybe I want to come back here and pick it up and make it go through, but it doesn't have to. It can stop right there. That's the thing about this. It doesn't have to. I'm the one that's making up the rules. And so then maybe this comes over, and then I can pick this up as well and kind of start to see where I want this to go through. Okay. So now what I can do, watch this, I think I'm going to have that come back and connect with that one. This is just sort of like a nice little game to play with myself to see how I can connect all these. And then that can come over. Okay, and then I can flip it, and I've got these two marks there. Oops. And again, I'm just trying to be quick and spontaneous. And so I've been really trying to focus on these curvy lines to help contrast a lot of that geometric structure. And I think on here, what I'll do, again, I'm just trying to connect as if they wrap around the edge. So I think what I want to try to do is have that come up and connect to that. And that's a nice way of kind of running it together. So now all those red lines, really flow through. And like I've done with some of the shapes, I can go back, and I was doing that, making it thicker, bolder. So I kind of do the same thing with this just to make it stand out. I don't have to do that with the entire line, or I don't have to do this at all, but I kind of like that thicker, bolder line to make it stand out and bring a little bit of contrast to the other parts of the page. So if I go back here, you can really see how that bold line really flows through. So yeah, so kind of some lines, some shapes. Another thing to think about is maybe I want to go to a page where there's maybe something beginning, or something like this. So yeah, yesterday I was doing tunnels and cutting holes in pages. So something like this might be interesting. I like to do this a lot with cutouts, is to take a pen or a pencil and to go through and to trace the cut. Oops, see, now this is where I need an eraser because I slipped with the pencil. And so that way, now what happens is I have a rectangle that's the same size and shape as this hole, and now those rectangles are there. So I can, if I wanted to, I could do that with every single page in this diminishing tunnel. Okay. Maybe I won't do all of them, but again, that starts to create a frame. So that's kind of interesting. Let's go ahead and think about that. Let's go back. You know what? Let's see. What do we have here? So I have all these things going on. So here's an interesting space. Maybe I'll take my black pen and trace the holes. And this is just helping to connect the two spaces. And then I flip it. And then I think I'm going to take my red and I'm going to make that frame. I like that idea of framing, but this time I'm just making up the frame. And my style of working is one where I just flip around a lot. So what I'm doing is exactly how I typically work in my journal. So whether I'm sitting in front of the television, watching a TV show, or watching something on streaming, I'll sit there, and this is a great thing to do at that time because I don't have to focus so much on it where I'm missing out on what I'm watching. Or like I said before, I can be sitting, I may have gone to get my car fixed, and I'm sitting in the waiting room at the car dealership or at the garage, and I can sit there and doodle in my journal, and it's a great way to pass the time, and I'm just slowly building. I keep coming back to this notion of small artistic acts. So really my journal is an accumulation of small artistic acts, and they just slowly build up and add up to the journal, or add up in the journal, to create a very complex page. So it's a very simple notion of like, oh yes, let's draw some simple lines and shapes. but it's allowing me to build up the structure of the page. It's allowing me to build up textures. It's allowing me to create the composition, but it's really allowing me to kind of create that complexity by slowly adding these little things here and there on the pages. And like I've mentioned already, it does create a space, kind of a focusing. It helps me quiet my mind. And I can't help but think of a TED talk, a TEDx talk actually, that I just shared today on my Facebook page by a gentleman. His name is Ralph Ammer, and he talks about how drawing helps us to think. And one of the things that he talks about is this idea of reflection, and that when we draw without a lot of detail, we're not looking at something, we're just drawing shapes and drawing lines, we really can allow our hand to kind of build up some muscle memory, and then it allows our mind just to reflect on whatever. So whatever comes up, I can sit and reflect on. Yeah, it is, like I've said before, it's a little hard to do that whenever you're doing a live stream video and you're talking the whole time. But this just gives me a simple act that I can do. And there's not a lot of rhyme or reason. A lot of it is very random. This wasn't so random because I did line it up with those windows on that other page. Okay, so that's that notion of maybe framing a space. So I've talked about just drawing some simple line, or just drawing some simple shapes, drawing shapes that are kind of random, or tracing windows and creating frames. I also talked about using the drawing as a texture in the background. But I have all these pages that I've started over the last few days, and it's kind of like, okay, what happens with those? So I could draw some more shapes, but I want to go back to lines, and instead of the lines like up here that flow from one page to another, maybe I want to think about lines that can help divide the space. So that's another way to kind of think about it, and I like doing this especially with writing, so that way I have spaces that I can write on, or write in. Actually, let's find. So right here is maybe is a good space. So I'll turn to my blue Uniball pen, and so I'm going to divide the space, and there's lots of ways that I can do that. So one of the easiest and simple ways is this notion of columns. So if I just draw a line straight from top to bottom, and then now I have two spaces. So maybe in this space I'll end up writing some other time. In this space maybe something else goes on. Maybe I want to divide the space with another column or shape, kind of with this coaster being, the circle being glued here. I'm kind of, I don't know if I want to go down over it. That might be kind of interesting, but I'm thinking maybe section off so I can draw part of a space. So thinking about how I can divide up the space of my pages might be an interesting thing to try out. So I can do straight lines and columns. I could do shapes. Maybe down here I want to do a shape. And I can go back and thicken that line if I want, or maybe I wait until later to do that. There's no right way or wrong way of doing that. So kind of helping divide up the space a little bit. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll find spaces like this where there are either collage elements, or maybe find one. Or like here where I have some watercolor elements, watercolor pencil elements, and I can go back and, since I have my nice blue pen, maybe I want to have that rectangle stand out even more. So by creating a nice bold outline, okay, and then do the same thing over here. That's going to create some unity just by that repetition of the same kind of line. Since I've repeated a lot of the color and the textures, and even I repeated those bold black lines, but this dark blue frame now around the rectangle starts to help define those rectangles a little bit more. Really makes them stand out more. Okay, and then I think maybe one of the last things that I'll share is the notion of drawing some simple patterns. And I mean, I've already done that with like drawing rectangles in a row or circles in a row, but another thing I like to do is to take my pen, whatever color I'm using, and start thinking about some stripes. So you can see down here, maybe on this page, I've done some stripes. So that's something that I like to do a lot of. So oftentimes I will find a space, like here seems to be a good space. So maybe on the edge here, I'll go and just draw some lines in to make some stripes that go across. And if I wanted to, I could go all the way down, or maybe I just want to do it part way, and maybe I want to come over here now and draw in some lines. And those stripes will connect this picture with this frame, and then it connects it with that part over there. And then maybe I want to do some little stripes over here. Okay, so little stripes like that can help kind of connect things. It helps fill the space. But then maybe some bigger stripes. Let me find another page. Again, I know I'm jumping around, but this is exactly how I work. I jump around all the time in my journal, finding spaces. So I'm going to do stripes again, but this time, you know what? Maybe I'll just do it right here on this blank page. So drawing is a great way to start pages as well, just to kind of take the blankness away. So maybe I want to just start and do stripes. And I have no idea what's going to happen with these. Maybe drawing these in now are going to be a great place to have some words and some writing at some time in the future. Maybe some of the spaces are a little bit bigger, and maybe some of the spaces are a little bit smaller. Okay. So I can continue just flipping through, and I could spend, I mean, I've already spent a half an hour just kind of going through and drawing some random things in here. And you can see from some of these other pages how some of that drawing has already been done in this book with you know, different frames and different lines, different stripes. So anyway, but I think that kind of wraps it up. So let me go ahead and flip this over, and I'll just kind of share some end thoughts. So I think for me, a lot of times the drawing in my journal, at least lately, has been a lot of just this kind of random, simple lines and shapes, and it's not like real detailed, realistic drawing. I do that sometimes, and then sometimes I'll do like faces and characters and monsters and such, but I think the majority of my drawing in my journal really is just simple lines and shapes as a way to kind of create some structure, to create some patterns, but most importantly as a way to really just kind of allow me to focus my mind, allow me to kind of quiet things down, use that kind of meditative quality, that idea of meditation in the marks, and it just gives me a chance to sit and reflect on things. And what I find is that as I'm working in that mode and I have that kind of mindset, that the ideas really start to pop. And especially if I'm just, when I'm jumping around, it seems that as I'm jumping around and flipping pages, it's what I'm seeing and thinking all kind of starts to merge together, and connections start to get made. And so I think maybe that's the key of this, is that the drawing allows you to kind of quiet your mind down enough so that those connections can be made. And all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, I never thought of that. And I think that's because your hand is moving and it focuses your mind. I know I've said that a lot during the video, but that's kind of what it does. So anyway, appreciate you kind of popping in here. I know some of you just sort of popped in not too long ago. We're starting to wrap up, but remember, you can always catch the recorded video on the Facebook. So as soon as I'm done here and it stops, it's going to save to Facebook, and you can go back and watch it from the beginning. So really appreciate you taking a little bit of time coming in. So spend some time just kind of doodling and drawing simple things, simple shapes, simple patterns in your books or in your drawings, and kind of see what kind of comes about from it. So tune in tomorrow. So tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'm gonna dive into some of the fold outs. So you've seen maybe as I've been working here like this, like, okay, how do I do that? Or the page cuts. So I'm going to kind of dive in. Here's a page that's been cut. So I'm going to dive into some of that tomorrow. So again, 10 a.m. So if you kind of like what you see, please like it, leave comments. If you have questions, feel free to leave those as well. And please share. Let your friends know. So if you like what you're seeing, share the videos, share posts, whatever. Let people know. And so then that way we can maybe get more and more people that can kind of follow along. So anyway, until tomorrow morning, thanks for tuning in tonight, and happy creating.